And here to help us understand the broader picture is Justin Ling. He is a Toronto Star columnist, and he has written about incel culture and ideology extensively. He joins us from Montreal. Justin, as someone who's studied these communities for a long time, what reaction are you seeing online to what happened in Montreal?
Yeah, it's the same thing as every previous attack we've seen over the last 10 plus years. In the online spaces where these, self-proclaimed incels gather, it's celebration. It is jubilance. It is this sort of fetting of another one of their own, striking back against a system that they think has sort of deprived them of meaning and companionship, a system that they think is going to put them down and marginalized them. I'm not being hyperbolic here. Literally, they're calling him a hero and a saint. They're likening him to Elliot Rodger, who is really kind of the first icon of the incel movement, let's say. He's a guy who launched a mass shooting at his university in California in 2014. And subsequently, you've seen round after round of other incels committing similar acts of violence and being kind of put in this kind of pantheon of incel terrorists by their kindred spirits.
Can you put that reaction into perspective for me? Is this something that over the decade or so that you've been following it or we've been aware of it, is it something that's growing, or is this the same number of people online talking to each other?
Yeah, it seems like it's pretty stable. I first started looking into these online communities more than a decade ago, particularly after the 2018 van attack in Toronto that you probably remember that killed more than 10 people. Back then, we were looking at a number of different online spaces, probably hundreds, more, maybe thousands of people in them. Today, it's much the same. Some different spaces, some the same. We're still talking about hundreds, maybe thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands, but I think that's probably a little, overboard. And thanks to some research we've had over the last couple of years, we know that many of the people in these communities have stayed in them for a number of years. Some new people have come in, some people have left and come back, but we're looking at a relatively small, but really kind of nihilistic, angry community that is in some cases, celebrating violence, and in some cases is actually encouraging it and even committing it. So this is difficult. These are not big online spaces. They're not on major platforms. We don't even know where some of these websites are hosted in many cases. We don't know who runs them. But in many cases, we don't know who's posting on them either. Most, if not all, of these accounts are anonymous. So it's hard to say if it's growing, shrinking, or remaining the same, but we know that these spaces have remained relatively popular amongst this community for quite some time.
What is driving young men to join communities like these?
Well, that's it. So you're looking at a whole bunch of different things, but I think really central to it is this internet addiction, right? It's this falling into a vortex where you find kinship amongst other people who have been bullied, who might have rough home lives, who might agree with you politically. We know that sort of far-right, anti-Semitic, anti-female, racist philosophies tend to kind of cut across these communities. You might find people who have also been bullied, who also have really bad self-worth, who feel like they can't find friends or a partner, who feel intensely lonely and alone. They find each other on these online spaces, and they kind of clump together. And it feeds this sort of, like I said, addiction to the internet, but also an addiction to feeling miserable. And what you actually see in these spaces is a bullying between these incels who are looking for friendship from each other, right? You see them saying to each other, you're never going to find happiness, you're never going to find a partner, you're never going to be valued. And it puts them into this really, like I said, nihilistic, violent space that drives many of them to violence. And you actually see a counseling to violence, a counseling to suicide, them telling each other, go out and take some people with you. So it is a really toxic and horrendous ideology that is really centered around the internet, these communities, and this really intense hatred for women and society that they think has sort of left them alone.
I noticed the headline on your column in the Toronto Star today, Justin, said solutions to the problems of incel culture are hard to find. But given what you know, where do you think we should start in terms of solutions?
Listen, there's kind of no really bad ideas here. We know the federal government is pursuing new online social media safety legislation. It's relatively well tailored. I imagine that couldn't hurt, though these websites are not going to be happy with regulation. They're going to resist it and not abide by it at all. We know they're trying to give police new tools to do online investigations. That probably couldn't hurt either. But really, we're talking about the need to find a way to reach these young men and fundamentally to convince them to log off, at the very least, from these online communities, but in particular from the internet altogether. I mean, we are seeing the effects of internet addiction, in some cases pornography addiction. We know that the shooter here targeted the headquarters of a major international online pornography company. That is a relevant bit here. But we also need to get them, off addictive online video games, addictive online spaces, off the addiction of feeling miserable all the time, getting them back in the real world. That really is the only solution here. There's going to be need for targeted interventions and therapy and counseling and support, which we have wildly underfunded in this country for a very long time. But fundamentally, it's going to have to start with, how do we convince these guys to fight their loneliness by going outside? And I know that sounds simplistic, but that really is step one, and we have not figured out how to do that yet.
Thank you for your insight, Justin.
Thanks.